Hey everyone, and welcome to Mount Athos and Aquinas Fellowship, where we seek to break the wall of divisive rhetoric and unify the East and West in the bond of peace. In this episode, I'll be engaging with the controversial topic of created grace. The term created grace is undoubtedly taught by scholastics such as Scotus, Bonaventure, and Aquinas, and is even authoritatively alluded to in the Council of Trent against the Protestant reformers. The certainty of this teaching is undeniable amongst the Latin West, and as such deserves careful consideration and elaboration to steer clear from mischaracterization. For many are those who, through rhetoric and polemical purposes, ridicule the Holy Church for teaching something that, at first glance, doesn't accord with sound orthodoxy. But if orthodoxy is a standard, the one must first consider the writings of those who claim the name, and after careful consideration of their writings, see if they don't find themselves more inclined to the Latin position than appears at first glance. For the mind is prone to misapprehension, and when apprehended rightly, truth shines brightly. Thus it is necessary that we first unfold the orthodox view before we dive into a deeper consideration of the Catholic perspective. Let us begin by first laying out the fundamentals of orthodoxy, found especially in the writings of St. Maximus the Confessor. In his dispute with Pyrrhus, he lays out some very strict boundaries when it comes to how we speak about the incarnation of the Logos. For Maximus, God has one will, which is natural to nature, and thus also has corresponding energies or operations that flow out from it. God's energy or activity discloses the nature such that if the activity was created, the nature would be created. Maximus's understanding of this unfolds beautifully as he goes back and forth with Pyrrhus, with Christ as the subject under investigation. This conversation is centered on the hypostatic union of the two natures in Christ. Some of the principles that Maximus lays out is as follows. Christ has two natures, and thus two natural wills corresponding to those natures. The divine nature is uncreated, and thus the energies from this nature are also uncreated. The human nature is created, and thus the energies from this nature are also created. This union is so sharply distinct that for Maximus, the only avenue for union of the two natures is via the hypostases. That is, the union of the uncreated and the created takes place in the person as one subject. This one subject, the divine Logos, is composed of two natures, two wills, two operations that are neither mixed, confused, nor separated. Maximus is clear that in Christ there cannot be a synthesis of created and uncreated, nor a synthetic will nor a synthetic activity. Truly all the works of Christ are theandric, but not such as to reduce the God-man to one new theandric energy. Maximus rejects any understanding of grace that means God's divine energy has so penetrated the human nature as to form a something else out of it. Indeed, Maximus is firm that the God-man never becomes synthesized in any way. When asked by Pyrrhus how Dionysius could say that via the hypostatic union Christ had one new theandric energy, the divine Maximus responds that only in the sense of quality can one say the human nature works as one new theandric energy. This is because quality is such that it allows for interpenetration without confusion, so that the human nature still does what's proper to it, and the divine does what's proper to it. He goes on to say that a knife heated by the fire still cuts as a knife, yet even though it has the quality of heat, the heat is only such that it's accidentally hot in virtue of the fire, and not in virtue of its own nature. This implies that the knife is always held in the fire such that it receives perichoresis, as the fire adds an additional quality to the knife, that is, the quality of being hot. If there is no abiding fire, then there is no abiding heat. Such is the dispute with Pyrrhus summarized succinctly. To reiterate, each nature does what is proper to each with no mixture, synthesis, confusion, or separation. The only avenue for deification in Maximus's terms is if the deification terminated in the subject being deified as a quality and not as a quantity. To further the proof that Maximus views grace as a quality can be read in his various texts on theology, that Christ's human nature was, quote, deified not in its essential nature, but in its quality, close quote. Now this quality that Maximus strictly rejects as quantity seems to be something within the subject being deified. He goes on to say another area of the same book, goodness, although by nature is uncreated, yet because of God's love for us, it allows itself to come into being through us by grace. Maximus, in short, is saying that what is uncreated by nature is becoming participated in by the creature as coming into being. Now, when something is coming into being, there are two terms implied, namely that which is going from non-being to being, and that which is bringing about the being. In this instance, God is the being who is doing the acting, and the being who is being acted upon is the creature. The action is the uncreated goodness, terminating in the creature a coming into being via participation. Now that Maximus conceives of the term of the activity as a creation can be seen in two places of his writings. The first I'd like to touch on is found in the second volume of his Ambigua, question 26. In question 26, Maximus is answering the difficulty of whether the proper name of Father denotes the essence or the activity in God. For Maximus, the question is a trap set in front of the theologian to fall into. If the theologian says the Father is the name of essence, then the Son cannot be the same identical essence, as Eunomius would say. But if Father is the name of an energy, then the Son, Maximus concludes, would have to be a creation and thus not divine. It's important to understand what Maximus is saying here. Whatever God does as an energy terminates a product, he says, that he identifies as a creation. This is also made clear in his dispute with Pyrrhus, where he says that the energy has an object that is terminated outside the agent. For this reason, Maximus follows Basil, believes that the Father cannot be the name of an energy, but is properly a relation that subsists in the Godhead. Following the same argument, if one looks at the second volume of the Ambigua, question 23, one will be forced to conclude that God's movement is said to be an inner condition that God creates in the said object of his free will. In question 23, Maximus is reflecting upon the words of Dionysius that states God is called at one time love and desire. Another time he is called desired and loved. Maximus gets very precise when he states his answer as follows. The divine is moved to the extent that it creates an inner condition of desire and love amongst beings capable of receiving them, and it moves insofar as it naturally attracts the yearning of those who are being moved to it. The words of Maximus cannot be more unambiguous, even as he states himself that he is being clear. Though God's love is an uncreated energy, the one who God terminates this love in, moving to himself, has a created desire and love. Maximus's explanation of Dionysius is not unique. In Thomas Aquinas' commentary on the divine names, his response is nearly word for word identical. Both the Eastern angelic mind and the Western angelic mind are in conformity. For Aquinas, commenting on the same part as Maximus, states as follows. It pertains to God that he should move, as desired and loved, and cause motion in others, and for this reason it seems to pertain to him that he is lovable, creating love and other things. Since we have laid a strong foundation for Maximus's orthodoxy thinking and have seamlessly transitioned into Aquinas, it only seems appropriate that we begin to explicate Thomas's own works and compare with the divine Maximus. When considering grace, Thomas, like Maximus, concludes that grace is a quality inhering within the subject. This quality is such that it renders the person as a new creation. Now remember, for Maximus, this new creation, according to his disputation with Pyrrhus, is not a creation that changes the substantial nature of the creature, but rather a quality as an accident inhering within the subject, causing it to take on a new mode of being. Even as God is said to be moved and to move by being lovable by creating love and intelligible creatures, and the object of love, so too is God said to be moved by gracing the creature, which is a created effect inhering as a quality in the person. Since Aquinas, like Maximus, has a strong adherence to Chalcedon, it's important that he articulates this new mode of being in such a way that doesn't synthesize the creature with the Creator in any respect. Distinction and unity. For Thomas, the term created grace refers to nothing else than the creature receiving the deifying grace in a manner appropriate to a human nature. If one wants to see more about the metaphysics, you're welcome to check out Classical Theist's video on created grace. My goal is not so much to break down the metaphysics, but to find commonality in the two great minds of the East and the West. Now, that Aquinas doesn't view grace as a creaturely substance, but a created effect terminating from the energy of God, can be found in his Summa. For he states as follows, quote, "Grace is said to be created inasmuch as men are created in reference to it. That is, they are given a new mode of being." Close quote. Now, since grace is an accident, it has no independent existence apart from the subject it inheres in. That one says created grace in any way other than I have laid out shows that the elated mind has misapprehended the argument of the angelic doctor. For if grace was a substance, then it would subsist apart from God and apart from man. If it subsists apart from God and apart from man, then it cannot be an accident. That the scholastics call created grace an accident is so the theologian can grasp what it is not, namely a thing between God and man. But rather, as Maximus and Aquinas agree, grace is a quality, an interpenetration of the fire in the blade, and not the blade in the fire. The test of orthodoxy has made clear that the teaching on created grace is not foreign to her own fundamental understanding, as expressed in Maximus the Confessor. Thank you all for watching this video, and stay tuned for more upcoming videos where I will be discussing divine simplicity, the uncreated light of Mount Tabor, the Barlamite-Palamite dialogue, and many more issues. Until next time, God bless.